Good afternoon. I'm Dara Bunjon. I'm the food enthusiast here at Jaymore Living. I'm a food writer, food stylist, PR maven, and a frustrated baker. Those of you joining us live, drop your comments and questions into the comment box, and you'll see me turn from time to time to check and see who might have an inquiry for both myself or my guest. Today's guest is Jody Eddy, a James Beard nominated and IACP award winning cookbook author. She has been featured in the New York Times, Vogue, Washington Post, Bon Appetit, you name it, she's been featured in it. She has a degree from the University of Minnesota and the Institute of Culinary Education in Manhattan. She has cooked at Michelin three-star restaurant Jean Georges in New York, Heston Blumenthal's The Fat Duck in England, and the late Floyd Cardoza's Tabla in New York. At executive editor of Art Culinaire, which is a quarterly publication for professional chefs, has written for Food and Wine, Saveur, you name it, she's written for it. You might have heard her on radio programs, NPR, America's Test Kitchen, and All Things Consider. She is a cooking instructor. She runs Huga workshops, recipe development for corporate brand, leads culinary tours, is developing a TV show for global streaming service, and just finished her first novel. She is based in Europe. I thought she was in Spain since we spoke. She changed her mind. She's in Portugal. Let's bring in Jody.
Great. Hi, Dara.
Hey, Jody. Well, at least I got that clear, because I looked at my notes from early on and it said you were moving to Spain from France.
Yeah.
And then I saw your Instagram and you said Portugal. And I went,
yes.
Okay.
Very happy here.
So I usually ask what's on your plate today, but it's 8 p.m. where you are.
Yeah.
And now that we determined it's Portugal, so what is on your plate for tomorrow? Because your day's pretty well wrapped up. Am I correct today?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Actually, tomorrow I'm really excited. I went to this really beautiful artisanal Portuguese craft shop a few days ago, and tucked in the back was a very tiny Japanese restaurant. It's just run by a Portuguese man and his wife from Japan. And so I'm going there for lunch. I'm really excited. I'm in Porto, and the food scene here is just incredible. Incredible.
And I assume that tourism has really picked up. Everybody's talking about Portugal now.
Yes. Almost to a fault. There are so many tourists. I'm sure it will die down, as summer fades away. But yes, very enthusiastic tourists everywhere. Yeah, but I can't fault them. I'm a tourist too, essentially. So, yeah.
Well, we know that you're coming to the States and you're going to be promoting your latest book, but I'll get to that. I'd like to quote that I saw on your website, and let's see if I can put the right emphasis where the commas are. Your quote was, "You enjoy telling the stories of people I meet, writing recipes inspired by the ingredients and cooking techniques I discover, and journeying to the planet's far-flung places to taste something unusual and get a little lost, conjures the magic readers and writers all know about, the white-hot light sparked when you surrender to a good story." So my question to you is, what is possibly the most unusual little thing that you found in the far corners of the world that you've traveled to?
Wow, this is a tough one. Well, as my friends will attest, I am obsessed with Iceland. And I know that everyone is obsessed with Iceland now. But I started going there in 2008, and it was right after the economic collapse. And there were no tourists, essentially. And they didn't have a really thriving food scene, and they didn't necessarily appreciate their own traditional ingredients. They were importing everything. So they would import and appreciate prosciutto, but not eat their own incredible grass-fed lamb. And so I think ultimately I did write 2 cookbooks there with the chef Gunnar Karl Gislason of Dill. It's the first restaurant in Iceland to earn a Michelin star. And but Gunnar is really committed to the food traditions of Iceland. And I mean, I would say he's very humble, so he wouldn't give himself all the credit, but his commitment, I think, to the food producers and the incredible products they were producing has just really created a culinary renaissance in Iceland. And so it's interesting now to go back. I've been there over 50 times, and to have seen this evolution now, and this appreciation that tourists have, certainly, but Icelanders themselves have for their own products, like smoked Arctic char and geothermal salt and their own barley. It's really been incredible. And the food producers, a lot of them have become good friends of mine. And so it's been really heartening to see this evolution, to see how much they were struggling in the beginning, and to see how they're thriving now and how appreciated they are. So, yeah.
So, you said Iceland, you loved Ireland. Weren't you in Ireland? How many times?
Yeah, I wrote a book there about the Wild Atlantic Way, which again, it's kind of a theme often in my books. It was profiling Irish food producers along the western route of Ireland that starts in the north and goes all the way down to the south. And the Food Tourism Board has just done an incredible job there of really mapping out, where all these treasures are for locals and tourists to follow. And yeah, so I spent a few years there working on that book. I lived in County Mayo in Connemara. And then I actually was there almost throughout the entire pandemic as well. I was in County Clare. And that was, it was just to be able to have all that fresh air, so much walking, at a time when we couldn't have contact. I would walk alongside my Irish friends, on the ocean. And yeah, it was just
I can imagine.
To be back. Yeah.
You used to run marathons, didn't you?
Yes. Believe it or not. That is going deep. It's amazing.
Well, I'm just saying, I know you gave it up when you were younger and there was a reason for it, but it's still the outdoors. It's the energy.
Absolutely. Yeah. I ran 6 marathons, Dublin and New York a few times, Chicago, Seattle. And but the outdoors for me, I grew up in Minnesota and, spent all my summers at my grandparents' cabin on Lake Mille Lacs. And then right after college, moved out to Seattle. And that was just like an outdoor wonderland to me. And then of course, everything was attached to food. I learned how to scuba dive, but then I was like, okay, I'll go diving, but only if I can get Dungeness crab while I'm there. Everything still was like, what can I experience from a culinary perspective while being outside? Yeah.
Well, I think you are drawn to the colder climes. We think Seattle, we think Ireland, we think Reykjavik in Iceland. And the 2 books, am I pronouncing it right, Huga?
Yes, I was very impressed at your pronunciation. It's a challenge.
It is a challenge. Folks, the title is Hygge, which we might think is the term, let's get higgy. But no, it's pronounced Huga. And you did 2 books, the Huga Life, which is about lifestyle, and Huga is sort of like relaxed.
Yeah, it's
comfort. Explain Huga Life a little bit.
Well, Gunnar introduced me to the term, and it's actually a Danish term. But we were in the West Fjords in the middle of winter in Iceland, and it seems like that should be a really inhospitable place when the snowbanks are like 40 feet high and you're truly no one is around. I asked Gunnar, like, why do I always feel so content even in the middle of this? And he's like, well, Huga, and it was just this idea. And I know it's in the zeitgeist now, but at the time, I don't, most people had not heard of it. And it really is just about appreciating, the simple everyday moments in your life and trying to make connection. And it's connection with yourself, with nature, with others, with traditions. It's just really taking the time to appreciate. And I think a lot of people now would associate hygge with Arctic, Scandinavian culture, but I really feel like hygge can be introduced at any time of the year. In summer, it's about picnicking outside, and spring, maybe it's about bonfires, fall, collecting leaves. It's, this idea of, and it's
embracing.
yes. And when I see like hygge products for sale in department stores, like with a rug that says hygge, I'm like, oh, this is the opposite of what hygge is. It's not about commercializing anything. It's about just inviting it into your life in a way that's not filled with pressure. It's just like, just take a minute, exhale, enjoy where you're at.
I mean, you've traveled. You've written about Ireland. We've talked and Iceland. We've talked about that. India, Cuba. What is on your travel wish list now?
Mongolia. Sorry, but that's a big one for me. I'm trying to talk friends into it. I don't have any takers yet, but I might end up going on my own if nobody will go. But also for my upcoming book, Elysian Kitchens, I covered a monastery in Japan, and that was my first time in Japan. And the chef I was working with who helped facilitate the visit, Name Shinobu, he was like, I can't believe you came to Ireland or to Japan for the first time and you spent 6 days living in the monastery and then you left and you went home. And I was under time constraints, but it did feel like a missed opportunity in a way. So I'd like to study some monastic traditions in Korea, and I really want to return to Japan again soon. So,
okay.
And Mongolia. Any takers, email me.
I'll go. I'll go anywhere.
My friends are rolling their eyes now because they're like, stop talking about it. Just go. But
yeah. But you're used to traveling alone, aren't you?
Not really. I mean, I usually travel, my friends are often in the culinary field, or even I have a lot of friends from my university days. And, I'm fortunate. Most of my friends are big travelers. So I usually travel with friends.
Okay, good.
Yeah. But I'm all about solo travel too. But yeah,
well, I'm at a point where my closest friends, most of them have so many food allergies, they don't go out to eat. And I go,
oh no.
I need a foodie to travel with. And being in my 70s, I'm not looking to go to someplace and hike,
Right,
so
right. Yes.
Yeah.
The door is always open here in Europe, Dara. So
I'll keep it open. Absolutely.
Great.
So we just brushed over Elysian Kitchens, recipes inspired by the traditions and tastes of the world's sacred spaces. And let's see, you did France, Japan, Lebanon, New Delhi, Latka in the Indian Himalayas, Spain, Ireland, Brooklyn, Minnesota, Canada, and Morocco. Was there any one big walk away from these visits, or probably multiple? This has been a long time project. When did it start?
Well, the origin of it, I went to a Spanish monastery, Poblet. It's actually in the book, but I wasn't covering it for the book at that time. I just had heard about their culinary practices and wanted to see them. And so I traveled there and I was so impressed by everything they were doing. The monk I was working with primarily was a former investment banker from Barcelona. It's
Really?
just so
Okay.
interesting to see him now. He's a monk, but they had, really cutting edge gardening practices. And he said, I am often approached by chefs in the world who want to come to the monastery. And then I asked them, do you want to be a monk? And they're like, no, I just like to stage there. And he's like, well, I'm at culinary school. And then I went soon after to Ladakh, to a monastery there called Tikse, which is a Tibetan Buddhist monastery. And again, I was just there to learn from the monks. But again, they were so of the world, but yet so rooted in tradition. I was just so inspired by that. And then soon thereafter, I was at the MAD conference, Rene Redzepi's conference that he used to have in Copenhagen. And I was in this little group of chefs, and they were all talking. It's almost like they were trying to outcompete each other on their monastery stories, like what they had learned. And I thought, I think there's something here. But I didn't want this book to just be, about one specific denomination. I really wanted it to kind of run the gamut, and we have Jewish representation, we have Sufis, and we have Maronites from Lebanon, and we have Catholics, and we have, it's very expansive, I would say. And yeah, my dear friend and the photographer, Kristen Teig, who's done just incredible books. I call her my Wizard of Light. She's so talented and fantastic. Right. We traveled together, the two of us, to the 11 destinations. And it was a journey. And I think initially, one of the biggest challenges was certainly access. Be it they didn't want to allow access to women if it was a cloistered kitchen, but we would show up and just kind of, learn about everything, and then we would eventually get access, but it was also sometimes just very hard to just get into the monastery. Japan, it was very challenging. The chef I worked with, he was just incredible and so generous about writing letter after letter, explaining what we wanted to do. And but then what started to happen was I also learned that so many of these monasteries are connected in some way. And so then, like, I was at a monastery in Quebec, and I really wanted to cover a monastery in Normandy. And I told the monks about it. And he's like, oh, I know the director. Don't worry. I'll get you in. I'm like, thank you. And that started to happen. And then they also had curiosity about one another. And so they wanted to be connected with each other. And so I ended up having these little WhatsApp groups, with, several spiritual leaders from different denominations. And we were chit-chatting about every random thing. And this all happened, our travel ended just before the pandemic. And I was so fortunate to then be connected to this incredible group of spiritual leaders about like how to get through hard times and what to do in your daily life to endure. And I don't know, this book has really been a labor of love for Kristen and I and my editor. And I'm just so excited for it to be out in the world at last. So, yeah.
Well, it's a long time coming. And obviously the pandemic, you were able to get everything where you had to be prior to the pandemic.
Yeah.
But if we think about that was 2019, it's now 2024, how long it takes for a book to process through and be produced.
Yeah.
And
then, with the pandemic as well, there were supply chain issues, there were printing issues, there's paper issues, it was just really so many things kind of coming together to slow it down a bit. But I feel right now in this sometimes tumultuous world we're in, that it actually, I think it's timely, even compared to where we were when we were traveling for it. So now I'm like, okay, it was meant to wait, I guess.
Well, we're looking for something that offers peace.
Yes.
Peace of mind.
Exactly. Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
and believe me, we're sitting at lunch and they start talking about politics and what's going on, and I could just feel myself tensing up.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, I am the ostrich with my head in the sand. It
Yeah.
affects my health. There's
Yeah.
nothing I can do about it.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
frustrating.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
depending what side you're on, you're going to think you're right. So,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
so we move forward, and
Yeah.
fingers hope that maybe Huga sets in the
Yeah.
right person.
Well, my workshops, those started during COVID as well, and I do, I have a pretty big corporate, primarily customer base, and it was just really necessary. I felt, it was, it's just kind of a reprieve, to
How to be with yourself.
yeah, exactly, yeah, yeah.
Oh, I have so many questions here.
Well,
So
I'm
I
a
want to.
talker, so I apologize for being long-winded.
You're not long-winded. I love it. And I'll let you know when the time runs out on the phone.
Perfect.
I
It's
now
the
have that on the checklist. Make sure the phone's fully charged. Uh, I want to tell people the book is Elysian Kitchens, recipes inspired by the traditions and taste of the world's sacred spaces. And hopefully there'll be a link. I sent it to them. It
great.
will come up. But if not, Jody has a website,
Mhm,
jodyeddy.com.
mhm.
Instagram, Jody Eddy,
Yeah. Easy.
EDDY, JODY. Not hard. It's not like it's Dara Bunjon. That you never
No,
get.
it's a strange name that I have, but anyway.
Okay, so looking, we've talked about, I want to talk about your book. I think it was the first one about the staff meals. Come
Ah,
in, we're closed.
yes,
I
yes.
think there's a fascination. I think the bear
Yeah, yeah.
has really opened up interest as to what's going
Mhm.
on in the restaurant
Yeah,
kitchen.
yep.
Um, staff meals. So I'll explain quickly that if you're in the restaurant, the chef, somebody in the kitchen prepares a meal for the entire staff, and then they go into service.
Mhm.
And dependent how mixed the kitchen is with cuisines of people's backgrounds. And you had said you always look forward to your staff meal at Heston Blumenthal's restaurant.
Mhm.
What was it about his staff meals that stood
It
out?
was, I actually, the first restaurant I was at, they charged for a staff meal. It was a minimal amount, but it was often then the people who were working the hardest in the kitchen who didn't enjoy the staff meal. And so I didn't appreciate it. And then I went right after that to the Fat Duck. And the first day, I mean, we had long, long days and nights. And there were two staff meals every day, lunch and dinner. And when I saw the lunch staff meal, it was outside on, I mean, it was idyllic, on these long wooden tables outdoors in this Edwardian village. I asked somebody there, I said, is it a special event today? Is something special happening? Because it was so beautiful. And
Right.
he was like, no, we do this twice a day. And I couldn't get over it. And of course, at the Fat Duck at the time, I think it was like third best in the world at the time. And so we had chefs there, but not just chefs, it was anyone, could prepare staff meals. So we had people there from all over the world. And so they would prepare, their grandmother's favorite dishes. And, so we were learning so much. And I as well loved how, staff meal is all about using up everything that we're not using that goes on the shelf, and you repurpose it for staff meal. And so it's about having to be really innovative with minimal amount of items at times. But then as well, I love how egalitarian it is, or it should be. The perfect staff meal is everyone sitting down together. It's the dishwasher, it's the head chef, it's
Right.
the sous chef, it's everyone, the servers, and we're all there together. And if things happen during service, which they often can do, where people lose it for a minute, that's where you just kind of work it all out, and you're not necessarily talking about the issue, but you're just having a meal, and then you finish up the night and you feel good. And when I co-wrote that, and my co-writer and I, Christine Carroll, we both had been cooks, and we were like, what's our favorite thing? And we were both like, staff meal. And when we wrote it, there was Chanterelle had a staff meal book out, and I think that was the only one at the time. But then several staff meal books came out, including Ferran Adria wrote one, and he did our foreword for that book, and his book came out at around the same time. And I've noticed now kind of a resurgence of it. There was a big article in the New York Times about it recently, and I'm sure with the bear contributing to that. So it's nice to see that, because some restaurants don't have staff meals, and I feel like we had a few restaurants that kind of did a fake out where they would make this elaborate staff meal, and then I'm like, I'd ask the staff, like, do you do this every day? And they'd say, no, we don't do this. And then they didn't make the book, because we really wanted it to be genuine. And I was at Art Culinaire at the time. So in the weekends, I traveled to 25 staff meals around the world in a year. And it was a lot, but we did Heston, Fat Dog, we did Fergus Henderson, St. John, Michelle Bras, Thomas Keller's Ad Hoc, Sean Brock. It was really amazing. It was head spinning, certainly, the journey, but yeah, it was great.
For people, a book is called Come In, We're Closed, and is available. All these books we're talking about, available on Amazon.com. You want to learn a little bit more, JodyEddy.com. Also, Jody writes for Substack, which you explain Substack.
Yeah.
Explain Substack.
Yeah, I think it's ultimately a newsletter, and I think it's just a great space, for anyone. It's not just about food, it's any topic, and it's a place to share whatever it is you want to share. You don't have to pitch anything, which is refreshing. You could just write, whatever it is you want to write. And now they have like a podcast feature, and, I have my future plans for Substack, to do more interviews and to just really make it my own creative space, and bring in the people, I think, that really inspire me. I recently for it interviewed my friend Johanna. She is this incredible goat farmer in Iceland. She saved the Icelandic goat from extinction, and her goats were in Game of Thrones. She's amazing. And, but it was just so fun to reconnect with Johanna, and, and I've been doing several interviews with people who have just really inspired my journey. And they're not necessarily the most celebrated chefs. It's the food producers, the people who bring the food to our tables. And yeah.
The ones who light that white hot spark.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Your muses.
Exactly. And also, like, I just interviewed a friend who runs an incredible food bank system in the US. And it's about food sovereignty issues. And I just want to bring in all those messages, and just share stories about the people who inspire me.
Right. So everybody, that's Substack, What's Good Here. And they're varying things. There's certain portions of it's free. If you really want to get the in-depth stories, there's a small subscription charge. So check it out. What's Good Here. You just finished a book, not a cookbook, and I think you have such a fascinating life. I would think, is it autobiographically inspired about your?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. The novel, yeah. It's I'm meant to. That's what I always wanted to do, was write novels. And one of my dearest friends in Los Angeles, who I've been friends with for 30 years now, she's just constantly reminding me, remember, that's what you really wanted to do. She's such a good friend to kind of keep me on task. And, so I just kind of took the plunge and did it. And yeah, it was not as stressful as I thought it would be. It was really enjoyable. And I hope to kind of continue with this work.
Right. And when people go to your website, if they're thinking about writing a cookbook, you can guide them and give them sort of template and things that you should have. Somebody just wrote it. It might have been David Light who published something. He had a cookbook and it was so poorly written that, all these things that you see, that what you need to have in a cookbook, what a recipe should be.
Yeah.
So it's important. You've done so many things. You've harvested saffron and cashmere. I think that's one of your Substack stories.
Yeah.
Let's see. You teach how to write a cookbook. There's so much. Oh, before I forget, happy birthday. 4th of July is your birthday.
Yes. Thanks. Yeah. It's a great birthday because, my entire life I had fireworks and everyone is off. So it's amazing. Thank you.
And you also set up, I think, for corporations or chefs, culinary journeys, trend journeys.
Yeah.
So it's very specific and it's custom made.
Yeah.
We've talked about cookbook development. I like one of the things, the many talents that you have. You're an ordained minister.
Yeah. Shout out to Mark and Teresa in Minnesota. I was asked by one of my dearest friends, he's my ultimate wingman, if I would become ordained and marry them. And that was fantastic. Yeah.
Well, I can talk to you forever, but
well, you've teased out so many threads, Dara, that I am not usually asked about. So I appreciate that.
What can I say? I go deep. I look for things. I just have notes here, scotch taped to books, and there's my phone. There's my phone, and underneath is books with notes. And I want to be prepared to have questions, but they're not formulated questions.
Great. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah.
Okay. But these are the formulated questions I told you I was going to ask, and we added one. So those who've watched the videos of these shows, we have a new one to add. If you wake up tomorrow with a new talent, what would it be?
It would be to be more adept at languages. I have friends in my life who just pick up languages so easily, and I try. And I struggle. And I think a lot of it is apprehension that I'm going to make mistakes. I am finding here in Portugal, they're very open, to just if you're trying, they're like, fantastic. And so I feel like I might have an easier time here because I won't have that fear like I've had in other countries.
Okay. Well, I have a fear with English, so that tells you where I am.
Exactly.
If you could go back and give your 18-year-old self a piece of advice, what would it be?
Yeah. I mean, I think I know a lot of people say this, but it's really to try to find work that doesn't feel like work. And, I have a lot of friends in my life that I really admire who seem to work all the time, but we talk about how we do work all the time, but it never feels like work. And I think that's what I would tell my 18-year-old self,
To find your passion and make it your work.
As quickly as you can. Yeah.
Okay. Was there an ultimate culinary fail you wish to share with us?
Well, so this is not a culinary fail, like something that I cooked but a really funny little short anecdote that was a fail from Elysian Kitchens. Kristen and I, we were in Morocco. We were working with Sufis in Morocco. It was so incredible. We were in Fez, amazing. Had this great week. And then the next trip, we were supposed to go work with a group of monks in Italy, in Umbria. And I had set it all up. We were ready to go, got there, and the whoever was running the monastery was the only person there. And he said, well, they're on holiday. And I said, oh, when will they return? And he said, in 2 months. And I'm like, what? We're here to do a photo. We came all the way from, and so we ended up turning it into a positive. We're like, well, we're in Umbria. Let's just eat our weight in white truffles and drink all the, liqueur that we can get our hands. Like, let's just enjoy and eat all the pasta. But I do think it's funny that we were ghosted by monks while writing the book. So that's a pretty big fail. But on their part.
Yeah. Well, we won't tell anyone.
Exactly.
What's the best bite you've had all week?
So I lucked out. In Porto, they have the Festival of St. John, and it was on Sunday, and it goes all through the night. So it ends on Monday. So I would say this week. And it was incredible. And the traditional foods, people come from everywhere. Just thousands of people pour into the city, and grilled sardines, caldo verde soup, just, simple tomatoes, salads, roasted peppers, and then their beer, which is Super Bock, that's everywhere. And it was just amazing, walking through the streets and just like grilled sardine stands set up everywhere. And I won't get fireworks for July 4th in Europe, but they had fireworks. So I'm like, there we go. And then they end the festival. Traditionally, it's a regatta, and they've been doing it for 700 years. The ships come in on the river, and they're bringing the grapes to deliver them to the port houses here in Porto. And so I watched the regatta on Monday afternoon. It was amazing. Eating more sardines.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, it was great.
Okay, and the new question, what are the 2 musts that must be in your refrigerator?
Well, Dara, you kind of sprung this one on me, and this is kind of dull, but I have to have mandarin oranges. I just love eating mandarin oranges every day. And I love hibiscus juice, just making, I guess you would call it cold hibiscus tea, but I have it all the time. I drink a glass of hibiscus juice every morning. So I guess those are my 2 musts.
Okay. And the final question, what didn't I ask you that I probably should have?
Well, you kind of hit it. But I was going to say, why is travel so important to me? And yeah, I think we've talked about that throughout this conversation, but I just think it informs kind of everything, that I do. And I think just constantly making those new connections kind of softens the edges, as you were talking about this crazy news cycle, just kind of building out those global relationships, and feeling connected. And as well, it can be really challenging, but I think that's good for the brain. And even feeling uncomfortable at times, but constantly learning. So yeah, that would be the question, I guess.
Okay. Well, like I said, I can continue to talk to you.
You as well, Dara. I hope we will have that offline conversation.
Maybe it'll be on Facebook and instant messages, but people should tune in to jodyeddy.com, Instagram, Jody Eddy. And I want to thank you, say happy birthday to you.
Oh, thank you. Thanks,
and I just have a couple of announcements to make. And thank you so much for joining us from
Appreciate
Portugal.
Door is open. Door is always open here. So keep it in mind. All right. Thanks, Dara.
Thank you, Jody. Okay, everyone. Next Thursday is the 4th of July, Jody Eddy's birthday, and the Food Enthusiast is taking off. I'm going to celebrate Jody's birthday. I want you to be safe, enjoy the holiday. More dogs run away on the 4th of July due to the fireworks. Look out for your pups as well as yourself if you're going to be playing with fireworks. On July 11th, my guest will be the QVC Cake Pop Lady, Mary Ellen Durr. And you can find her on Mary Ellen Cake cakepops.com, maryellenscakepops.com, and we'll see if I can find my tongue and continue this discussion here. I'm always free, and feel free to reach out to me on my email, food@jmoreliving.com, or the Instagram at Dara Cooks, and I also have a Facebook page called the Food Enthusiast. All shows are immediately archived in video form on Jmore Living's Facebook page and jmoreliving.com. We truly appreciate it when you share our show with friends and family. Feel free to go back into our archives and enjoy past shows. May your plates always, always remain full. See you in 2 weeks.